Hi boys and girls, we are going to start reading today Stuart Little, written by E.B. White, illustrated by Garth Williams. And some information I need to tell you about Stuart Little. This book was written 70 years ago. The copyright date for this book means the first time it was published was in 1945. That was 70 years ago. Now, here's some important information for you to know what was going on in the world 70 years ago. Do you know that a house in 1945 cost $4,600? That's the average cost. Most people for a year would only make $2,400 a whole year. A gallon of gas only costs 15 cents. A man's shirt, $2.50. Wow, that's pretty incredible. Okay, boys and girls, since this was written 70 years ago in 1945, some of the illustrations might look a little different, and you might hear some vocabulary words that you just have never heard before. Ask your teachers to help you understand better. So this is our title page, E.B. White, Stuart Little, pictures by Garth Williams. Our first chapter is called In the Drain. When Mrs. Frederick C. Little's second son arrived, everybody noticed that he was not much bigger than a mouse. The truth of the matter was the baby looked very much like a little mouse in every way. He was only about 2 inches high and had a mouse's sharp nose, a mouse's tail, and a mouse's whiskers, and a pleasant, shy manner of a mouse. There's Mr. Stuart. Before he was many days old, he was not only looking like a mouse, but acting like one too, wearing a gray hat, carrying a small cane. Mr. and Mrs. Little named him Stuart, and Mr. Little made him a tiny bed out of 4 clothespins and a cigarette box. Unlike most babies, Stuart could walk as soon as he was born. When he was a week old, he could climb lamps by shimmying up the cord. Mrs. Little saw right away that the infant clothes that she were provided were unsuitable, and she set to work to make him a fine little blue suit with patch pockets in which he could keep his handkerchief, his money, and his keys. Every morning before Stuart dressed, Mrs. Little went into his room and weighed him on a small scale, which was really meant for weighing letters. At birth, Stuart could have been sent by a first-class mail for 3 cents, but his parents preferred to keep him rather than send him away. And when, at the age of a month, he gained only a pound of an ounce, his mother was so worried that she sent for the doctor. Well, the doctor was delighted with Stuart and said that it was very unusual for an American family to have a mouse. He took Stuart's temperature and found that it was 98.6, which is normal for a mouse. He also examined Stuart's chest and heart and looked into his ears with a flashlight. Now, not every doctor can look into a mouse's ears without laughing. Everything seemed to be all right. Now, Mrs. Little was pleased to get such a good report. "Feed him up," said the doctor cheerfully as he left. Here are illustrations. There he is in his bed, and there's the doctor checking him out. The home of the Little family was a pleasant place near a park, New York City. In the mornings, the sun streamed in through the east windows, and all the Littles were up early as a general rule. Stuart was a great help to his parents and to his older brother, George, because of his small size and because he could do things that a mouse can do and was agreeable about doing them. Well, one day when Mrs. Little was washing out the bathtub after Mr. Little had taken a bath, she lost her ring and was horrified to discover that it had fallen down the drain. "What had I better do?" she cried, trying to keep the tears back. "Well, if I were you," said George, "I should bend a hairpin in the shape of a fish hook and tie it onto a piece of string and try to fish the ring out with it." So Mrs. Little found a piece of string and a hairpin, and for about a half an hour she fished for that ring. But it was dark down the drain, and the hook always seemed to catch on something before she could get it down to where the ring was. "What luck?" inquired Mr. Little, coming into the bathroom. "No luck at all," said Mrs. Little. "The ring is so far down I can't fish it up." "Well, why don't we send Stuart down after it?" suggested Mr. Little. How about it, Stuart? Would you like to try?" "Well, yes, I would," Stuart replied, "but I think I better get on my old pants. I imagine it's quite wet down there." "It's all of that," said George, who was trifling annoyed that his hook idea hadn't worked. So Stuart slipped into his old pants and prepared to go down the drain after the ring. He decided to carry a string along with him, leaving one end in charge of his father. "When I jerk 3 times, pull the string, pull me up," he said. And while Mr. Little knelt in the tub, Stuart slid easily down the drain and was lost to view. In a minute or so, there came 3 quick jerks on the string, and Mr. Little carefully hauled it up. And there at the end was Stuart with the ring safely around his neck. And then there's the illustration. So he went down the tub drain to get Mom's ring. "Oh, my brave little son," said Mrs. Little proudly as she kissed Stuart and thanked him. "How was it down there?" asked Mr. Little, who was always curious to know about places he had never been to. "It was all right," said Stuart. But the truth was the drain had made him very slimy, and it was necessary for him to take a bath and sprinkle himself with a bit of his mother's violet water before he felt himself again. Everybody in the whole family thought that he had been awfully good about the whole thing. And there's Stuart getting his little shower. And in the next chapter, you'll hear about home problems.